Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning for those in different time zones. I'm Lowell Unger. I'm Director of Policy at ACEEE, and it is my great pleasure to be introducing Congressman Paul Tonko, who represents New York's 20th Congressional District, including Albany and upstate New York. Congressman Tonko has a rare combination of decades of experience in energy efficiency, as well as a position at the center of congressional action on energy and climate. He is the chair of the Subcommittee on Energy, Environment, and Climate Change of the Energy and Commerce Committee in the House, where he plays a leading role in climate legislation and in energy efficiency legislation, including on low-income weatherization. While for most members, that would be their only committee assignment, somehow he also has gotten himself placed on the Natural Resources Committee and on the Science Committee. So he really is involved in climate legislation throughout. Prior to getting elected to Congress, he also led NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, which is one of the leading program implementers in the country. And before that, he was the longtime chair of the Committee on Energy in the New York State Assembly. And before that, a member of the County Board of Supervisors and is also an engineer. So we look forward greatly to Congressman's remarks. We hope that afterwards he will have time for a few questions. You can submit questions throughout using the Q&A function. There should be a window, and if that window is not up, then you look at the bottom of your screen. There should be a button labeled Q&A that you can click that will bring it up, and you can submit questions that way. Congressman Tonko, we look forward to hearing what your plans are now. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lowell, and I appreciate the kind words. I want to thank Steve and the entire ACEEE staff for the opportunity to participate in today's forum. ACEEE has put together a wonderful program, and I hope that next year we might be able to join together in person once again. But for now, I am honored to join everyone in this virtual setting, which serves as a daily reminder that we're living through some very challenging times. Obviously, the public health crisis, but also the associated economic downturn, the climate crisis, and the growing recognition that we must address our nation's history of injustices, particularly racial injustice. As we think about how these issues intersect, it gives me some hope that an economic recovery strategy focused on clean energy, justice, and equity will provide great opportunity to simultaneously address multiple facets of these different national challenges. The incoming Biden administration has a lot on its plate, but I've been very encouraged that clean energy and climate action remain near the top of their priority list. But of course, we know that we first must overcome the pandemic. Until we address the virus, crush the virus, we won't be able to truly start a robust economic recovery. I especially want to highlight the ongoing state and local budget challenges. We certainly know the importance of their programs to support efficiency and other energy priorities. But as long as these state and local budget issues persist, we risk cuts to, if not loss of, these amazing efforts from cities and states. I also do not want to lose sight of the hundreds of thousands of United States clean energy workers who have lost their jobs since March in sectors that were previously growing at twice the rate of overall U.S. employment. Before COVID, efficiency employed some 2.3 million Americans, but COVID-related job losses have disproportionately impacted efficiency businesses. There are still some 300,000 efficiency jobs lost since March, and the recovery of those jobs has been sluggish thus far. Looking ahead, we have a tremendous opportunity to put people back to work by modernizing our infrastructure to build a cleaner, more resilient, and more competitive economy with benefits both immediate and over the long term. I believe the incoming administration will agree that there are great opportunities for economic recovery and job creation in clean energy, resilient infrastructure, retrofitting buildings, and incentivizing advanced manufacturing. I think these are great opportunities. So I am grateful for the scope of today's forum because there are efficiency opportunities across all sectors of the economy, from buildings to industry and to transportation. And regardless of the sector, I firmly believe that efficiency needs to be the first solution we reach to in pursuit of our clean energy goals. As we start to prepare for 2021, I want to reiterate how excited I am for a clean energy agenda under soon-to-be President Biden. I've been working on energy issues for over 4 decades, and I can personally attest to the changes in how the public thinks about and prioritizes energy. Clean energy and climate action are now top issues for voters and were featured prominently during the campaign and debates and continue to be major priorities of the transition team and early personnel announcements. President-elect Biden campaigned on the most ambitious clean energy plan ever proposed by a candidate for the office. And it is clear that efficiency will be a major component of those efforts because it remains the most cost-effective energy solution and could deliver over 40% of the emissions cuts needed to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement. But if we and President-elect Biden want to embrace this efficiency-driven agenda, then we need to make certain that we're giving DOE the tools necessary to achieve the ambitious goals that have been called for. I think a top priority for 2021 will need to be getting the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy back on track, including resume setting of efficiency and appliance standards. Resuming those standards is an important part of the agenda. DOE will need more resources and personnel. EERE's employment levels are more than 180 FTEs below fiscal year 2013 levels. That was the tail end of implementing the Recovery Act, or ARA, as we know. There is important work that needs to be done by these offices, but it needs to start with right-sizing the budget given our goals. I think most of us recognize that we have big challenges ahead. But the good news is elected leaders in Congress and groups like ACEEE have been preparing and planning for the past 2 years. Last year, the Energy and Commerce Committee, on which I served, announced a goal of achieving economy-wide net zero greenhouse gas emissions by no later than 2050. Since that announcement, we have been holding hearings and roundtables with a commitment to looking at every tool across every sector to get there. We have learned a lot during this process. For example, our buildings hearing and our industrial sector hearing demonstrated how these sectors are interconnected. In many cases, industrial products are difficult to decarbonize, and this includes construction materials like cement and steel. Unlike operational emissions, embodied carbon emissions in buildings are locked in place on day one. They cannot be reduced through retrofits or new energy-efficient technologies. Embodied carbon is estimated to represent nearly 1/2 of emissions from new constructions between now and the year 2050. So finding ways to produce low-emission cement and steel in a cost-competitive way will be essential in achieving our goals. It was an important reminder of why comprehensive action is necessary to decarbonize our entire economy. Back in January, we released a proposal known as the Clean Future Act, a 600-plus page discussion draft of legislative language that includes energy policies for every sector under our jurisdiction. I believe this draft can serve as the beginning of a serious legislative effort in the near future, and many of its provisions have subsequently passed the House as part of infrastructure and energy packages. Our draft includes some regulatory policies, such as strengthening model building codes and DOE's Appliance Efficiency Standards Program, as well as major federal investments in weatherization and building retrofits, zero-emission vehicles and infrastructure, and, of course, clean energy deployment. We have also developed a national Buy Clean proposal to support public procurement of low-emissions industrial products, such as construction, such as cement and steel. Since January, we have been continuing to solicit feedback on this proposal, and we are working to improve and expand it. We have also seen the Select Committee release an excellent report outlining a vision for comprehensive action in Congress. In many places, that report reaffirms the work we've been doing, and in some places, it highlights work that still needs to be done. I hope that these efforts and the consensus building that has been done over the past few years has put us in the strongest, most prepared position possible to take legislative action in the 117th session of Congress. So the question becomes, what exactly does that action look like in 2021? As far as what can or might be done next year in Congress, I think it is still too early to predict. And it is my belief that it will take leadership from the White House to get anything over the finish line, so we'll see how their thinking develops as the transition carries on. But regardless of the outcome of the special elections in Georgia, we are going to have some very narrow margins in both the House and the Senate. It is my hope that with the weight of the White House, coupled with its executive agenda, we will be able to do more than you might expect with a potentially divided Congress. But it is very likely that we will all need to continue to try to forge bipartisan agreements wherever possible. The makeup of Congress may also heighten the need to identify and use existing programs to achieve our goals, as well as the importance of providing DOE and EPA the resources needed to act administratively where they have the authority to do so. In terms of the legislative vehicle, whether it's messaged as infrastructure or energy or stimulus or some combination of all three, I believe the Build Back Better agenda, a clean energy-focused economic recovery, which can put millions of Americans back to work while also making us a more just and equitable society, will remain a high priority for the House Democrats. In 2020, the House moved ambitious infrastructure, H.R. 2, and energy in the form of H.R. 4447, which were legislative accomplishments. These may give some hints on the shape of these efforts for next year. And I'm happy to say efficiency played a huge role in these given packages. For example, H.R. 2 included over $47 billion to support building modernization to improve the efficiency, health, safety, connectivity, and resilience of buildings. This includes programs focused on critical facilities, those including hospitals and schools and other public buildings, as well as low-income homes through the Weatherization Assistance Program. It had $3.5 billion to support grid modernization, which will enable buildings to more easily participate in demand response programs, and $1 billion for grants and other financial assistance efforts to promote solar energy in low-income and underserved areas to ensure the benefits of clean energy reaching every neighborhood. The package included several important clean energy tax credits, including the extension of the investment and production tax credits for renewable energy systems, raising the manufacturer's cap on the EV credit, and extending the credit for residential efficiency improvements, amongst others. There is also a $40 billion investment to accelerate the transition to a zero-emission transportation system that's recommended. This includes funding to support deployment of ZEV charging and refueling infrastructure, including a focus on building stations in underserved areas, as well as a significant expansion of grants and loan opportunities to promote the United States manufacturing of clean vehicles and component parts. And we reauthorized the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program, which successfully channeled money to local governments during the 2009 Recovery Act for clean energy priorities. These investments, coupled with increases to programs like LIHEAP and the State Energy Program, can make certain that we put people back to work and ensure every American gets to experience the benefits of our public investments. So I hope this might be a model for future federal climate and infrastructure investment, but investments are only part of the solution. I know that later today there will be a panel on cross-cutting issues. Much of the House's recent work has focused on sector-based solutions, but I also believe complementary economy-wide policies can play an important role in achieving our goals. I'm still a believer in carbon pricing as part of a comprehensive approach on climate, and I am developing a legislative proposal to guarantee the phase down of climate pollution between now and 2050. With that said, I do not know the likelihood that any major regulatory policy, whether it is carbon pricing, a clean electricity standard, or something else, may advance in 2021. But I will keep fighting to get some combination of these ideas on the agenda. Climate-focused investments are absolutely necessary at a large scale, but investments alone aren't going to get us to net zero by 2050. We need those complementary standards. So I plan to continually work on these efforts in Congress and support executive action under existing authorities. While I am certainly excited for the 117th session of Congress, I don't want to dismiss 2020 quite yet. I hope we might be able to lock in some efficiency wins this month. Currently, people in both chambers are working to reach agreement on an energy package for an end-of-year bill. I don't want to suggest that it will be the full suite of clean energy priorities that I want to see advanced. And it is far from certain that anything will be able to be enacted. But the good news is energy conservation measures have always enjoyed strong bipartisan, bicameral support in Congress. So if any energy policies move this month, there's a good chance some efficiency and R&D provisions will be part of it. Thank you again for the invitation to join with ACEEE, to be with you virtually. I am looking forward to hearing some comments, and I would be happy to try to answer some questions about our ongoing work in Congress. With that, again, a hearty thank you for all the great work you do, for the hope you provide for those of us who are looking to be sounder stewards of the environment, very, very driven by energy efficiency as our fuel of choice, and making opportunities for work for many, many Americans. Thank you again, and have a good conference.
Thank you, Congressman. That's an exhausting agenda just to think about. Let me remind people again, if you have questions, you can submit them using the Q&A function. And let me start. You mentioned both the Clean Future Act for the committee draft, and also that you're working on a proposal to guarantee phase down of emissions. Looking forward for large climate legislation, are you working on both of these proposals now to further develop them, or what do you see as the process going forward?
Right. Basically, we're going to take that framework that we introduced that was driven by the 9 principles that we unveiled over a year ago in Baltimore, Maryland at the Climate Change Conference. And we had developed that with all of the stakeholders having input, making certain we heard from labor, from business, from environmentalists across the board. That skeletal created the framework and the programming that we hope to advance in the Clean Future Act. We have now been meeting with stakeholders and will continue to hold hearings in a robust fashion to make certain that we can build a package and move it forward from the Subcommittee on Environment and Climate Change that I chair, or from the Energy Subcommittee chaired by Bobby Rush, and hope that the full committee, Energy and Commerce, will report to the floor the activities that we want to see happen. It's not going to be easy, but I can tell you we are driven, passionately driven, to move this agenda in the upcoming session of Congress, driven really by the hope provided by the messaging in this campaign by the Biden-Harris team.
Thanks. The question, do you support green hydrogen as a vector to decarbonize industry?
You know, any forms of clean energy should be looked at. And I think that, the potential for us having all sorts of resources and the intellectual capacity through research that's invested in research that can drive those new opportunities in an innovative way should not preclude or exclude any of these from being a sound choice. I think green hydrogen can do much for advancing our goals and enabling us to achieve those goals of a banner year 2050 with net zero greenhouse gas emission.
The U.S. has more historical responsibility for the carbon in the atmosphere and better ability to pay for the transition than most other countries. Is it fair to aim for an equal share of carbon reductions, or should we take a leadership role and leave more flexibility for poorer countries?
Well, I think we need to be a leader at the table, at the Paris Accord table. I was very upset when the effort began to remove us from that table. But the messaging now is that we're going to return to that table. We should be there to promote the concepts worldwide that can get us to achieve these goals. It's an international crisis. It's one that requires international solutions. And I think we prosper when we can set the tone and be the watchdog to make certain that everyone is committing to the goals that were established. And I think that we can also, by example, show that we are going to make this economy wide by every sector of the economy and use all of the opportunities of decarbonization that come our way. But we'll be robust in our efforts, but we're going to demand that our partners do equally well.
And can you expand on some of the RD&D, research, development, and demonstration provisions you hope to see passed?
Well, certainly we want to make certain that there's research into a sounder grid, grid modernization, getting more effective transport of electrons is very important to make certain that our innovative concepts, our renewable investments are getting the full bang for the buck. There also needs to be, I think, innovation and research done on all sorts of technologies that can help us meet these goals. I mean, there are many ways that we can retrofit manufacturing and our various businesses and communities. And we need to continue to invest in research. You know, when the dollars from the ARA Act, from the Recovery Act, over a dozen years ago, were brought to the table, it was an historic amount of investment in the Department of Energy. And we saw what that did. It enabled our renewables to be much more affordable than even projected at that point. And so because of those success stories, we're able to go forward with the kind of energetic vision and agenda that we have. But there's great discovery, I think, for additional innovation that will come our way by investing in some federal agencies that can partner up and share and shave some of the risk off of some of these research investment opportunities.
You mentioned that you're going to need to go vote, so we have lots more questions. I will keep going as long as you can, but please let me know when you do need to stop.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the clock. We've probably got a few more minutes, but it's getting down there. I'm trying to beat the clock here.
All right. So,
but I do appreciate the invitation.
So the next question I have is you had mentioned the difficulty the state and local governments are having. Can you talk about both what you think the new administration can do to support states in advancing climate and clean energy initiatives, and also whether you think there's a possibility of more funding from Congress?
Well, yeah. At first, we need to make certain that we maintain our commitment to local governments with with state energy programs, with weatherization efforts, LIHEAP funding, but we need necessarily to include municipal aid in any COVID stimulus package that's done. When we passed the HEROES Act on May 15th of this year, we've had several months of delay and denial coming from the other house. That is unacceptable. There is no mistaking that our municipal governments are hurting across this country. This is not about a bailout, as some would suggest in Washington. I thought the messaging coming from some of the leaders was inappropriate and off base. This is not about misappropriation. It's not about misuse of funds. It is about a precipitous drop in revenues through no fault of their own. If we can shore up those municipal governments, then the opportunities for doing the right thing, investing in efficiency programs is all the more possible. And if we can assist those state capitals with their budgets, they can maintain their commitments as they have over the years to energy programs and assisting and being a partner at the state level. So it all hinges on the understanding that this COVID challenge, this virus that needs to be crushed, has really created a series of crises, including an economic downturn. And we don't get to recharge our economy until we get to the other side of the COVID challenge. And so investing in the challenge while we're investing in municipal governments and state governments needs to be a multi-pronged approach from Congress in assisting directly our local communities.
And we have questions on both fracking and nuclear power as to whether they're part of the clean energy future.
Well, I think that nuclear power should be seen as a clean energy source. I know that it also puts many, many people to work and is heavily relied upon by several states, including New York, my home state. And in the area of hydrofracking, we have looked at any environmental risk that could be part of it. We make certain that we go forward and embrace any of the innovations, but wanting to make certain that it will indeed be safe and not create more damage to our economy or our goals than we need here.
And you talked about Department of Energy and administrative possibilities. What importance do you play in the role of the General Services Administration, GSA, in buildings and supply purchasing efficiency?
Sure. I think that, we have to lead by example. I think that we need to make certain that we are energy efficient as a transportation fleet, as a building infrastructure. We need to make certain that we show by example and then extend that to local governments and state governments. I think that the public sector investment is something that we're very, very committed to. We reflect it in our Clean Future Act legislation and do, again, want to lead by example and to secure those major goals, those savings that we can achieve for the taxpayer while setting a good example.
One question is on future trade deals. I'm interested how you see those impacting clean energy and specifically on transportation carbon.
Well, I think that as we go forward with trade deals, we have to be aware that we don't live in a microcosm of a nationalistic approach, but at the same time, we need to make certain that environmental standards and labor standards are up to par. We don't need to pollute further, and we can make certain that trade agreements can address that pollution scale and crank it back. It's unfair to expect our industries to compete in a international market that allows for them to pollute in other sections of the world. I think it's counterproductive. So I think these trade agreements need to really reflect our commitment to climate change in a very magnanimous way. And they also need to make certain that the labor equivalent is something that will lift the worker across the world in terms of remuneration that they receive for the hard work that they and skill sets that they bring to the workplace.
And what legislation will encourage development of low carbon transportation, especially in air and water, particularly given as the current epidemic lifts that more travel will happen?
Yeah, well, I think that it's important for us to do an infrastructure bill that is well beyond roads and bridges. I think it needs to be holistic. It needs to reflect that there are investments well beyond roads and bridges, which obviously call for our immediate attention with the deficiencies that have been noted across the country. but areas like making certain that we have broadband, which enables us to embrace innovation into all of the sectors of the economy, including transportation. We need to make certain that we have charging stations that are of plenty so that people will reasonably move to electric vehicles as a choice. We need to make certain that those improvements and those opportunities are shared with some of the most challenged neighborhoods for the sake of social and economic justice. And we can incorporate that into our thinking with public agencies and local neighborhood sharing. And we need to make certain that we continue to invest in efforts in the infrastructure that will bring about the kind of transportation challenges as we revisit those CAFE standards and all of the attempted rollbacks or the rollbacks that were achieved that need to be revisited, because we set a tone in Congress, and it needs to be a robust effort to achieve very, very stringent goals by the year 2050.
With that, we are not out of questions, but we are out of time. Thank you so much both for joining us today and for all your work on energy efficiency and clean energy.
Well, thank you so much. And I, again, appreciate the opportunity to visit with all of you today, albeit virtually. And hopefully the next time we'll be in person. But for all the successes that you've achieved, all of those that you are achieving and plan to achieve, we say thank you, because it's sound energy and environment policy and sound economic policy. So the 3 E's really are well respected and treated by the work that you do.
Thank you, and we do also look forward to seeing you in person next time.
Okay.
We now have Great. We now have a 15-minute break, and then we will reconvene and talk about industry still on the On24 platform. So look forward to seeing you this afternoon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.